Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tom Smiley. I'm from Fairview United Church, and it's our pleasure to have the Tom Reynolds Trio here this afternoon with us. Tom and his trio come from St. Andrew's United Church in Toronto, where they play quite a bit, but they also play at a number of other venues, actually across Canada. And so it's our pleasure to have them here this afternoon. We've had them at Fairview once before, and during COVID, when it was on video, but it was a really nice Christmas tribute that they played. So without further ado, I'll pass it back over to Tom, and thanks again for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having us. Thanks to Les and to Deborah and to Tom for the nice introduction. My name is Tom Reynolds, and I'd like to spend a few seconds talking a little bit about what we'll do today and introduce these fabulous musicians that I'm lucky enough to be with. So let me talk a little bit about what we do, because you might be thinking jazz and church. What is the connection there? I once was doing a jazz worship service, and one of the elders stood up at the beginning of the service and said, "I'm not sure whether to have a cocktail or to worship." So sometimes the connection between jazz and church is an odd one that people don't get at first. So I'd like to invite us today to think about jazz as a model musical art form, to think about spirituality, to think about life, and think about the ways that innovation and spiritual depth and transformation happens in ordinary lives, but can be actually a part of a worshipful community like Fairview United. Jazz is about musical innovation through improvisation. And improvisation is really nothing other than spontaneous composition. All of us do it every day, and we don't know we're doing it. When you have a conversation, perhaps that's the most ordinary form of improvisation. You know a vocabulary. You don't have a script before a conversation most of the time. We improvise together, and just even talking together. Jazz takes that, of course, in a musical art form. So, but think about it even as a conversation we're about to have musically together, but conversations you have in ordinary life. Improvisation isn't just making something up out of nowhere, but it actually builds on vocabularies, builds on traditions. It sings a new song from an old song, like the psalmist says. Sing a new song, not get rid of old songs, but maybe adapt and improvise for a new day. So we're going to play something today that actually takes a familiar hymn and retweaks it a little bit harmonically and rhythmically to open up something new, to illustrate that. Speaking of his music, saxophonist John Coltrane once said, "I found that you've got to look back at the old things and see them in a new light." That's a perfect quote to illustrate what I was just saying. And in his book, Moving to Higher Ground, and of course I teach at Emmanuel College, I have to bring books. So one of the books that I've gained a lot from is Wynton Marsalis's book, Moving to Higher Ground. The subtitle is How Jazz Can Change Your Life. And in this book, Marsalis talks about a number of things, and he's the director of the Lincoln Jazz Festival in New York, the Lincoln Jazz Center. He observes the jazz, as he says, innovative and creative character involves a range of postures and activities, and he lists them like this: risk, courage, trust, respect, attentive listening, navigating change, working things out with others, collaborating. Jazz links personal expression with collaboration together, like conversation between people sometimes does. And so what we hope to do today is begin to illustrate this a little bit more, moving with Wynton Marsalis's words and building on a tradition that has roots in the Black experience of racism and oppression in the US. Jazz builds, in fact, on the spirituals and the blues as an affirmation of freedom and transcendence, an affirmation that life is more than being held captive to a broken past and to oppressive conditions. Jazz is about resilience and resistance. And a theologian I particularly like, James Cone, says, it's the will to be despite non-being, as symbolized in racism and hate. So it resonates with hope and justice, jazz does too, which connects it also to spiritual life and communities. But if spirituality involves vitalizing connection with an energy perhaps best called God, and language of the spirit moves to this, jazz may be a fitting way of thinking about it. So I'd like to play with this together today and maybe even talk together with you, and you'll hear from the musicians in the band who I'm now going to introduce. These are some of Toronto and Canada's finest. I'm going to introduce Paul Novotny on bass at first. Paul has played all over Canada. You've probably seen him locally. He plays with Joe Seeley, well-known pianist. He plays with Robbie Botos, Jackie Richardson, and the list goes on and on. And I'm lucky enough that I live in his neighborhood, actually, so we get together a lot. But please welcome Paul Novotny. He has some CDs of some of these things today, if you'd like to talk to him later about it. Maybe he can talk about his work there a little. On drums, a good friend, Lauren Nearing. Lauren's played with everybody in town as well, and every Sunday morning, and often recently with Paul too, we're at St. Andrews United. Lauren's history goes way back, playing John McLeod's big band, number of other groups that he can maybe tell you about, but he's one of Canada's staple drummers, Lauren Nearing. I'm lucky enough that they're friends, so I can say, hey, let's drive to do a thing this afternoon. My name's Tom Reynolds, and what I'd like to do to start out is do something we do at St. Andrews. It's on a CD we just did, but we often play preludes as a way to focus prayer, to open up our sensitivities to the divine amidst and about to, take play in worship. And a song I wrote that we play for preludes several times is called Sanctuary, fittingly. But it opens up a meditative, prayerful vibe. So instead of praying with words, I like to open up in prayer with music. And the song's called Sanctuary. Thank you. That tune meandered a little bit into some places we didn't expect. The bass solo, which you heard from Paul, we listen to each other and respond when Paul signals. We move into a piano solo, and the piano solo moves into the form, much like you think it's a straight line, but it isn't. It always meanders. And some of the best, most intense musical moments happens when the straight line meanders a bit and when we're responding to one another. In a tune like that, which sounds pretty simple, it's actually quite complicated and responsive. So I highlight a couple of things in that. One, jazz never travels in a straight line. In fact, that's some of the richness. Unexpected things happen, and we're responding to each other. Secondly, then, it's about the response, and it's about listening and the mutuality that emerges then in the performance itself. So I'd like to play another composition off the CD we did. This one's a little faster, up-tempo, but it's like a musical journey. And speaking of traveling outside the lines, you'll hear it meanders into different places harmonically and rhythmically, and it's an example about not traveling in a straight line. So this song is titled Open Skies. It's a nice Baldwin piano, very bright and present. Yeah, Lauren and George are so fabulous to play with. I'd like to talk a little bit together so you can hear a little bit about each role that the bass and the drums play and how it's a conversation that we meandered. I mean, that song, like I said, is a journey song, meandering a bit. You heard Paul take a fabulous bass solo. I followed up, but then it moves and it moves to the final ending. And I'd like to ask, what's your role in that, and how does it play out in the conversation? And I'll bring the mic to you here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great.
Should be on if it's green.
Check, testing. Yeah, there we go. Hi. Great questions. In order to start my answer on that, I'd like to go back to what it is you said about some of the core words that inform us with regards to how we communicate. And there was one word that I thought actually was kind of missing from the glossary, if you will, or from the list. But I think that one of the biggest things that jazz tests us on every time we play is acceptance. Acceptance of what it is that we're hearing around us in real time. And how do you work with what it is that's being presented to you, because it's different every time, and make the others in the group heroes in the moment with your decisions? And I learned this specifically from a piano player by the name of Jeff Keyser, who I worked with. And it's not like he told me about this. I could do no wrong when I was playing beside him, because even though I felt I was, maybe not up to his standard, what he did is he listened to me so carefully and so closely and embellished everything that I did, that he elevated me to a new level. And I think that if that was a value that we all had on this planet in life with others, where what we do is we seek to elevate and help others, that's a great example that jazz can give us for the way that we endeavor to basically conduct ourselves every day with others and in life. And so specifically with regards to how I view my role, I think we all have intuition, don't we? We can feel what's coming. We can sense what's coming. Composers have always known that their best thing that they can do is write what's next. And I think that to be a successful accompanist, like as a bass player or a drummer, when Tom is playing and improvising, we sense and we feel, we have intuition about where this is going. We feel. It's just like water flowing down a hill. You can see where it's going to go. And so acceptance and losing the inhibition to be able to flow where the natural conversation really wants to go. I think those are the key things that I would say empower me anyway.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Paul. Lauren?
Hi. Just to follow up on what Tom and Paul just said, the idea of you don't have the opportunity to decide whether you like or dislike what someone else is playing. You don't have the opportunity to judge it. You simply respond to it. You respect it and you respond to it. It's how this thing works. If you start being overthinking it, as a sort of gentle way to put it, it'll just disintegrate. It's a fairly tenuous thing, but if you have to take the attitude of complete acceptance of the other, of their view of what's happening at that moment in the music. It's essential, and it's an important quality. It's funny how the best qualities of life tend to be the best qualities of music, especially when it's improvised, because it's community, it's interaction. You got to cover a lot of bases to make it happen. But I just want to move on from there just for a second. Tom was talking about functions, all right? So, and just a little quick music history. I have the African function. Everything, this is all related to African music, what I do. The instrument, the whole process. Tom is European music. That, everything that happens there has to do with Bach and Beethoven. Right. At its core, I mean, I'm talking about specifically what we played today, but at its core, its origins. Paul glues that together. He makes that, this and that make sense with each other. It's harmonically, it functions harmonically as the center of the pitch, rhythmically as the center of the time. It's just like, it's the glue. I mean, that's why he's there, and not over there. You know, so I mean, it's simple function, but that interaction is critical to the overall sound. We blend them together. We blend all those you know, diverse elements into something that's known as jazz. And improvised music, generally speaking, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hold on to the mic and just press it so it becomes amber? Perfect, thank you. Beautiful words that accentuate something I'd like to highlight and maybe demonstrate. Jazz is an art form that builds from African spiritual traditions, highlighting call and response, where a religious leader would lead and the congregation, the members in the community would respond. Call and response, a very interactive form of liturgy, of ritual worship that gets translated into music itself. You hear it in the chain songs, you hear it in the spirituals, you hear it in jazz where sometimes in a riff one leader makes, the rest of the band answers. So it's like questions and answers, call and response, which really builds into the very texture of music. Music asks questions, goes out on a journey, and then the listener anticipates resolution, resolving together. And that's part of what I heard Paul saying is he's listening and anticipating and supporting and accepting what's going on as responding to it. Like our ears are trained in a certain way to release attention. Like, you know, I don't know whether you can linger in that tension for a while. So, oh, sorry. That it gets so acculturated, and even our basic harmony structure in Bach, you know. It wants to resolve. There's a kind of tension and release, question and answer. Jazz stretches that out and actually moves it to an interaction. So accepting the moment is a way of listening and responding to another as a call. And as Paul highlighted, what an ethical dimension to that stands out. The idea of, wow, what's being said is important. How can I respond as part of that conversation? How can I be a part of that river flowing? And whether it's a role or not. So one of the things, too, is the idea of call and response. What happens when a mistake happens? Well, in jazz, mistakes happen a lot. Like today on the piano, for me, several already, hopefully. But you respond and you move on, and when the collective energy of musicians who care, that mistake can be made into a transformative moment. And there's a story I love to tell from Herbie Hancock's book, Possibilities, who played with Miles Davis. He was the pianist for Miles Davis. And he tells a story in that book, and he tells it in a bunch of online interviews, where the band was cooking one night. Everything was great, the energy, and Herbie made a mistake to him. He hit a chord that he thought, oh no, I've ruined the whole thing. He became self-conscious until something happened. Miles played a note that made the wrong chord right. Miles responded to his chord as an invitation into something more. Miles didn't know it was a mistake. Herbie did. But because of that trust and call and response and the moment in time, that pressure cooker of the moment of improvisation, Miles responded, it made it right, and the music itself was transformed. What a beautiful lesson for life. failure is being transformed. A teacher of mine once said, "There's no wrong note, Tom, just wrong resolutions." And resolutions get worked out together in the response to one another. I mean, I think there's a lesson for society and ethics. But just building on what Lauren and Paul said, I want to do something together so you can hear the improvisation in its sort of maximalist form. I'm going to start out with one note. And sometimes that's all it takes in a community. One note sounded in love can be transformative. So I want to illustrate that musically. I'm just going to play a note. I won't even name what the note is because Paul will pick it up. And we're just going to make up a song right now and call it For You. And we'll make it up, and it's all about the response and the interaction. Lauren Nearing, Paul Novotny. Yeah, I could live doing stuff like that for a while. We don't want to over self-indulge. There's one thing that is fun about jazz, and that's singing new songs in a different way. And I mentioned we're going to play something, a song you might sing on any given Sunday. It's a famous song written from an English melody, and the song's called Be Thou My Vision. Do you all know that one? Maybe you could sing along if you know it. We take that song and turn it a little bit into a jazz vein while still trying to honor the melodic impulse of the song. So it's a delicate balance. Like unrecognizable changes often don't become transforming changes, but recognizable changes that alter something just enough so that it can be sung in a kind of new way sometimes can be vitalizing. So here's our offering of that. And we'll just play it twice through. Or actually, why don't you take a solo second time and then we'll go through it. Sometimes we talk about what we're going to do too in advance. The song is called Be Thou My Vision. thank you. We took that off a little bit at the end. That's great. What you're hearing today is about creativity that happens on the spot. So I'd like to pause for a second for you to think, and those who are watching us online, to pause for a second to think about where those pieces in your own life and in your own worshiping community where creativity is most alive and real for you. Think for a second, where do you feel most creative? And then once you think of it, what is it about that thing that makes it so energizing and significant for you that you feel happy in those moments? What is it about those moments? We don't have a mic to pass around, but I think it's illustrative about the ways in our life that maybe jazz can inform it. The energy that happens in the creative interaction in your own life with whatever you're doing, and in your worshiping community that draws out vitality, that draws out meaning, that makes life somehow richer. And as a theologian and a person of faith, those are moments where God and the Spirit is at work. Something is happening to draw out community, to draw out life in life-giving and transformative ways. I think about call and response. I think about riffing, resilience, all the things that living creatively is about. So that's a prelude to introducing another book that I brought with me today. It's an older book by Mary Catherine Bateson. You might have heard of her. Her book is called Composing a Life. And in this book, she tells the story of 6 extraordinary women in their own lives dealing with hardships. There's no life that's exempt from hardship. And these lives are improvising, taking what's there and making something of it and adapting and pivoting in conversation with others. She draws on the metaphor of jazz to think about living life and actually improvising as a way of navigating change, pivoting, responding. And I go back to Paul's word, acceptance, to accept, to trust, to risk, even failure, and that somebody else might turn that failure into something significant, like Miles Davis turned that mistake of Herbie Hancock's into something transformative for the music. So think about life even as jazz, life as improvisation, and the courage to risk and to make mistakes and to make them together. One of the things I think that comes with that is forgiveness. In the moment, we don't have time to say, okay, Tom made a mistake, stop the music, start again. There's a forgiveness in time itself. We just keep going. And I'll try again. To begin again and again with a group like this is a stunning part of making the music happen. So there was a part of the piece we just played that I couldn't get a rhythm thing happening. So I tried it again. And the second time, yeah, it worked better. But thanks to the support of a group playing, families, faith communities could be like that, where we begin again together. I think that is something important in jazz along those lines. And one of the things about jazz is its forward momentum. I mentioned that. We don't have time to sort of say, stop again. There's a pulse, a movement forward. And part of that's in the swing. We haven't really played swing yet today, but there is a lilt. There's a forward momentum in a rhythm that derives from African 6/8 time, but it actually is part of what makes jazz improvisation vital in the early days, that dotted eighth note. I won't be a music nerd here and explain all that, but this note that actually propels the music forward like a stagger, like a lilt, dun, dee, dun, dee, dun, and the music moves forward. But I'm going to stop and ask Lauren to explain it, and then we want to illustrate something with a tune we all know where swing is the ingredient. Lauren, do you want to pick up where I stumbled? We have the mic,
Can everyone hear me?
but I don't think it's online community can hear you.
Okay. Oh, yes. Hello, online. Yeah, swing. Swing has its origins in African music. When we talk about African music, we're talking about the music of worship. We worship with melody and harmony. Traditional Africans worship with rhythm and dance. And swing comes from that. That's where it has a power that's unique because of its origins to some degree. But its most important quality, and the quality that a rhythm section strives for, is the propulsion, is that sense of powerful forward motion without acceleration. You know, the simplest way to describe it is, you know, you don't have to accelerate from here to Montreal to get there. You simply have to find a speed and stay there, and the machine will propel you to your destination. We're that. We produce this feel, like it's a body thing, right? The whole African concept is a body thing. It's not a mental thing. And so to grab those bits of that tradition and incorporate it in all these other traditions, but that sense of motion. We were doing a gig last night, and we were playing a lot of swing. And it's really simple. I think it was Louis Armstrong who said, you know, the easiest way to know if the crowd is liking you is just watch their feet. If they're tapping their feet, if they're moving their bodies, it's working. And if they're not, they're not. And it was last night, just watching people, you know, when it was strong, like there was, you know, no one could stand still. They were all dancing, and it was great. And it's a body thing. It's just something. It's a very physical thing, but this sense of propulsion is what gives it, what draws you to it. The strength of motion. I mean, it's way more complicated than that, but to me, that's the essence of it. When it's swinging, you just sit back and enjoy the ride.
It don't mean a thing if they ain't got the swing, but we're not going to do that song. We'll try. Do you want to start us off on this, or Paul?
Could
do you
I
wanna
just add one thing? We use the term swing very casually amongst us, but maybe, you know, that doesn't really portray what it is that we're trying to say. But so if I've always visualized the jazz swing, which is ding, ding, da, ding, ding, da, ding. It's done on the ride cymbal. But when it's done right, you can visualize it, I think, if you were to take an egg and have it actually roll end over end. So it would have a lope to it. So that's the visualization of it. But what's the antithesis to swing? Would be straight. And that would be almost like a square wave, like it would be, you know, so it would be very boxy and would have no roll to it, if you will. So those visualizations help me, even when I'm playing, because I ask whether or not, I say to myself, what can I do to empower, as the engine of swing, the lope that we need to have?
That's really great.
It doesn't mean a thing if it doesn't have that swing.
It doesn't lope.
It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
Yeah. One thing that often people... Yeah.
One thing swung in what I said, and one thing didn't. Which was it?
Well, it's interesting because often when you hear swing, there's a syncopation, might be another way of thinking about it. The beat's displaced. And instead of clapping, if a measure has 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, a straight would be to clap on 1 and 3, which are the strong beats of the measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. But a swing displaces that and emphasizes the weak beats of the measure with its own momentum forward, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And pop music builds on that, the whole thing builds, and you can, I don't know, I'm moving my body. It's just hard not to move your body when you're clapping on 2 and 4. So let's try it. Yeah, it's gospel too, yeah. Yep. All right, Lauren, you want to start?
What are we playing?
Oh, yeah. We'll do summertime, since it's that season. How's that? Okay.
I shouldn't have even asked.
In what? A, right? A minor? Okay, okay. One of the fun things is in the jazz idiom, a lot of songs people just know, and so we all knew that, so we named a key, and we hadn't rehearsed that. So we were just making it up together based on what the traditional form of the song is. So we even went into a 6/8 time field there at the end, just sort of following and adapting and improvising together. One of the things, too, that song displayed, because it's a simple A minor chord that it starts out on, but you can add dissonance, but in a way that actually builds harmonic complexity. So one other illustration in jazz is of the no wrong note syndrome, like what you hear as dissonance. Okay, how do I do this? That sounds like dissonance, but two notes sounding in dissonance is an invitation to actually the creative improviser. Two notes sounding in dissonance, okay, what can you do with that? Well, that's an extension of an A minor 9. I can use that and add a minor major 7th, which actually, that's where my brain goes with the vocabulary. But you can take a note. Possibilities are endless what you could do, and I won't indulge, even though I'm tempted on a nice Baldwin like this, that even dissonance is an invitation to a deeper harmony. Wrong notes are an invitation to right resolutions. Dissonance is an invitation to harmony. Mistakes are an invitation to beginning again. I mean, that's the life lessons that jazz sort of is all about, and what Marsalis talks about in his book, and what every performance with these guys, who, like I say, I'm lucky enough to call friends, teaches me. So one thing we'd like to do is play a song, and thanks to Deborah, that I wrote for Deborah. And the song's called The Joy of You, and we'd just like to play it and riff with it there. I'll say a few words about the harmony, because there's a pedal tone, what we call a pedal tone, a same note, F. But this song builds on that one chord into multiple different harmonic possibilities. So you can hear it in the left hand, you can hear it in Paul's bass. So just want to invite you to listen for what, on the one level, is a really simple kind of frame, but invites all sorts of harmonic complexities. Thanks very much. One thing we'd like to do, and then we'll sort of wrap things up together, is play a song that we've used for a prelude at St. Andrew's, and plays with the image of home. Every song is about getting to a destination. Tension and release, harmony builds tension and then resolves. And I think of that as an existential, kind of universal human thing, the longing for home, the longing to be home together. And so I'd like you to think about ways in your own life, in your own congregations and spiritual journey where home might be found most readily. And this song kind of conjures that image, so maybe it'll open up those reflections. The song is called Almost Home. letting the bass have the last word feels so good. Beautiful, beautiful. Paul Novotny on bass. Lauren Nearing on drums. And my name's Tom Reynolds. Thank you very much, and thanks to you who are watching this online. Hope you've gotten something out of it and enjoyed the music. We're going to play something in a swing feel, just a quick blues. We can't escape by playing the blues, a basic form in jazz out of which so many things are derived. So we'll play one tune and we'll make it up. We'll call it Fairview Blues. In G? Sure. That's a different key. Okay. O G. Lauren, you pick the tempo. Thank you very much.
Okay, as a music director at Fairview Church, I want to say a big thank you for the trio for the great discussion and performance that showed us how jazz and spirituality can be linked to provide us spirituality, meaningfully experience a life that exudes spiritual vitality. And more information you can find on their website, tomreynolds.com.
Yeah, sure.
And thank you for Fairview United Church for supporting this new project. It's a new project for our choir. Next year, jazz and spirituality.
Next year, we're going to do it.
Okay.
Thanks. Happy to chat later if you'd like to. So nice to meet you all.